Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from Melbourne, Australia, Mr. Bernie Kelly. Bernie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Bernie is a business transformation mentor and author. He is involved in elevating business transformation leadership. And as I just said, he's an author, and all of you know I'm very partial to authors. He's an author of a book titled Leading Disruption with Grace, and we'll talk about his book later on in our conversation. So, Bernie, before we start talking about anything else, tell me about your own journey in brief.
Yeah, it's always a great question. And I think, we were just chatting before about a lot of the people that listen to the podcast, how they're sort of looking forward on their journey. And so I sort of like to think about my journey in sort of three different phases. I had the really good fortune of working in large global corporates for the first phase of my career with companies like Kimberly-Clark that were on the good to great journey. Some major Australian food and beverage businesses, the global business Diageo. And I really had the privilege and benefit, I guess, of doing sort of quite significant work, but also learning from some wonderful mentors. And that was definitely my phase one.
Correct.
Then my phase two, I was the CEO of a business transformation company that worked across Australia and Asia. And that actually, we had a team leading sort of major transformation programs. And one of my big ahas out of that, I guess, is just that recurring theme that the fitness that the leadership team came to the transformation with had such a profound impact on the outcomes. And that actually has sort of moved into my third phase, which is actually more of a, supporting others to really lead their business transformations with grace and actually sort of working through this disruptive period. So now I'm sort of dedicated to being a mentor and facilitator for what I call the bright sparks of our future industries, the bold executives that are really trying to shape the future, and obviously the boards that are governing our organizations.
How wonderful. And Bernie, you also state that this cumulative impact of business transformation leadership capability is the strategic opportunity / risk of our times. Help me understand this and give me an example if possible.
No, so it's based on a lot of research by EY and their global risk survey. And just that if you look, so in their research, they actually talked about how over the last 4 or 5 years, most of the leaders surveyed, like nearly 90%, was sort of saying they'd been involved in 2 or more business transformations in the last 5 years, which is not a surprise when you think about the technology that's been turning over. Through that period, people have had to pivot and move industries and change through COVID and other things like that. So it's not that extraordinary that most of them have been through 2 or more sort of disruptions or transformation phases.
Right.
And nearly 70% of them actually acknowledged that they'd at least been through one, what the Ernst & Young research called an underperforming transformation.
Okay.
And in that underperforming transformation, all the research of actually the emotional burden and the weight of that. So really the interesting insight is when you start to look across this decade that every time you're leading an underperforming transformation, there's a downward step that your organization's fitness, your organizational fitness goes through. And that obviously accumulating sort of becomes a harder and harder challenge for the people to get back on track and a bigger and bigger risk.
Very interesting. And, let's talk transformation. How do you define the word transformation?
There is, this is a great conversation, right? It's because it is about so I sort of look at it through 2 sort of different lenses. One of them is actually evolving at the pace to remain relevant. So that's actually where you are in a high-performing organization that actually is relevant to its industry, and that one requires sort of that evolutionary pace to sort of be leading the market. The other one is actually where every now and again people are off track from that relevance, or they do need the twitch, and it is actually about being able to lead through a revolution to be able to get back to relevance.
Hmm.
And those two are the only effective paths of transformation.
Hmm.
The other, like in the ladder of things below those, are people that are sort of declining in their organizational capabilities and market relevance.
Hmm. And when you talk about a business transformation leader, do you
Yes.
look for certain kinds of skill sets in such an individual?
Yeah, so it's really so it's really, this is a really fascinating thing is, and like listening to your your career, you know that you've led business transformations through your
Hmm.
your career, and you can sort of think about that actually I deal with business transformation leaders from around the world, and the recurring pattern is not actually which function they come from, because actually my observation is that there's many people who are successfully leading business transformation came out of very tech centric, very operational centric, very financial centric, very sort of HR change management centric, and all of those different sort of fields that people come out of. But the thing in common is the transdisciplinary view that they're actually trying to make a systemic change, that they're trying to look at a holistic way. And therefore, they are those people that are concerned about how to actually make all things come together and achieve that sort of step that's needed.
Interesting. But, when I was preparing for my conversation with you, it was interesting to read about transformation. And it is often said change plus growth equals
Yes.
transformation.
Yes.
I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah, no, that, and I thank you for sharing that quote. It is the word that I sort of typically use is actually more about the relevance, right? So you actually are sort of keeping, because from a sustainable transformation point of view, there is about the market relevance, and that actually is the strategic topic nowadays. And if you go through different industries, consumer trends are changing, the technology that's possible, the opportunities and challenges are changing. So actually being able to connect back to those is the true transformation to a different form that continues to remain relevant.
But the other aspect also, and I've seen this, in the corporate world, and I'm sure you work with so many leaders, most people like status quo or status quo ante.
Yep.
How do you persuade leaders to transform?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and the reality is, I think that the longer I've been in the game, just acknowledging the fact that you can't persuade leaders to transform. Now, what I mean by that is the leaders who lead transformation, actually creating the space for them to actually come to it themselves. Because I think that, and you think about this if you think about, you or your listeners think about this in their own lives, there are patterns that I've had that have been useful for me. And when I see that they're no longer useful for me, that actually is when I can change that. So a lot of the deeper psychology work now is actually being able to help leaders to see patterns that no longer serve them. And when you see patterns that no longer serve you, internally it makes a lot of sense for you to actually move. And then once you're moving, you're actually on that transformation path.
And when you work with so many different organizations, can you share with us, no names, of course, on some of your challenges and some of your learnings?
Way too many learnings, right? Because I'm a continual learner, so there's lots and lots of learnings.
Yes.
One learning is that I think that is for effective business transformation, it's absolutely essential that there is that all the centers of business transformation are engaged. And I think that understanding that the bright sparks of your future industry are engaged, that the bold executive are engaged, but also the board, that those three centers of gravity are involved in owning and governing and driving and bringing the energy to the whole business transformation. That actually is a must. And I sometimes see where people employ someone and expect them to carry the yards, but it really is it's a team effort.
And at what stage of a company's life cycle, if people do decide to transform, are you called in to help and support?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So over the years, I actually I had the good fortune, as I sort of talked about right at the start,
Mm.
to be involved in companies that were world class and really leading in the world
Correct.
in their different things. So that sort of real good to great ambition is
Mm.
definitely a major theme of mine. And then actually in the book I wrote in 2020 called Traction, the 4 practices of change fit leadership teams, I
Mm.
actually sort of went through and sort of through a lot of research and engagement with other people's research, what are the actual change fitness levels?
Mm.
Like imagine like at the top, there's actually those who are shaping industries,
Mm.
and the very bottom would be collapsing, or
Mm.
avoiding the inevitable of collapsing just above that. And that real turnaround end um, is not my preference. The real preference is those who are embracing change. So the more the top end of the change fit ladder, where they're
Mm.
embracing change, they want to actually leverage their capabilities for global impact,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that they actually are keen to be contributing to shaping their industry and
Mm.
a better world.
And I was also seeing that when there is a merger or an acquisition,
Yeah,
the company that is being acquired goes through, or their employees have to go through the most significant transformation because they're being subsumed into another organization.
yeah.
If you've handled any of these, what have been some of your learnings from such an acquisition, and how does the acquired company handle transformation?
This is a profound question, and you know it, right? Like, so mergers and acquisitions, all the statistics sort of show that it's a high risk
Yeah,
game, and there's a long track record of
correct.
unsuccessful outcomes or not meeting targeted outcomes of mergers and acquisitions. And I think from experience and the being the acquirer and not bringing too much ego to the game is actually the one of the real hard-earned lessons. I think that it's easy when you're the acquirer that you and I sort of have that ego thing going, and how to actually be uh, how to really learn from the other company and be open to that, and not just transplanting everything. That you actually go, well, hey, the company that we're acquiring has skills, they've got perspectives, they've got insights, they've got talent. How
Mm.
do we actually open up for that? And I think that being a leader, practicing that, it's hard work, right? Because we can intellectually say it, but really opening up to that is
Correct.
actually hard work. And
Correct.
that actually is, yeah, leaning into that
Mm.
openness, particularly being led by the acquiring firm, is a
Mm.
key
Well said.
lesson over time.
Well said. One more question on transformation, and then I want to move to your book.
Yeah,
And this
yeah, yeah.
question, Bernie, is on culture. Culturally, we are all different based on
Yes,
how we may have been brought up, uh, based on which country we belong to, based on what is the culture of the organization.
yes.
How do you handle culture, and what is its impact on transformation?
Yeah, so we all bring different priorities and different backgrounds and so much understanding, and
Correct.
I think that actually trying to lead positively in culture is a very humbling practice, right? Because
Mhm.
the reality is that um, the more I know I don't know.
Mm.
And I think that actually sort of leading with that curiosity and the inquisitiveness of other cultures and what they bring to the table is actually
Mm.
100% fundamental in this. That I go, well, I wonder what I like looking at all your achievements, Ash, and just thinking about those that I there's just so many things that we could be sort of talking about. And I
Mm.
think that that curiosity of people is sort of really fundamental to get a culture,
Mm.
to be able to understand a culture. And I can, if I'm honest with you, I can look back at times over the years where I probably assumed too much. I've assumed my cultural
Mm. Mm.
priorities onto situations, or
Correct.
I've assumed my uh, what matters to me onto situations, and not taken the time to really
Mm.
engage and understand that. And I
Mm.
think that actually is something that we all are on a continuous learning. I'm so excited about this modern era, just how much more you can learn about the world compared to what we could have years ago. Like, I know when I think back when I was starting my career, I had the good fortune to be in global companies, and I learned so much from other people there. But
Yep.
really, now you can be continually learning, right? As you were sort of saying, even great podcasts like this, you can be dabbling and sort of understanding other cultures and the wisdom that other brings. One of my real pet interests is actually learning from wisdom from cultures, and India's got an amazingly deep history of wisdom. It's sort of, and actually what can we learn from that is one of my hobbies, actually, I guess, just trying to build up that sort of thing.
Well, that's very interesting to know. And we once we finish, I want to tell you about my new book coming out, which is very different.
Wonderful.
But let's move to your book, Bernie, Leading Disruption with Grace. And before I ask you a question, I'm going to ask all of you and listeners to go and check out Bernie Kelly's book on Amazon, Leading Disruption with Grace. I will go and check it out myself. So, Bernie, tell me a little bit about.
The call out should be that I actually it won't be on Amazon until about July.
Oh, okay. So
yeah. So I've actually got it in a free form where I'm definitely talking about it with clients and people in my network, and that I plan to. I'm going to actually complete it and have it ready for Amazon, etc.
Okay,
in that next quarter.
So it will be ready in July, August.
Yeah,
so I will encourage all of you to go and check out the book. But tell me a little bit about the book, and what was your hypothesis when you decided to write it?
Yeah. So I've been a practitioner in this sort of space for about 30 years now, but it just keeps going on, right?
Yeah.
It is fascinating. And that whole time I've been really curious and probably a little bit obsessed about how to there's been phases of my life where reliable excellence has been a thing. I had large supply chain operations, IT integration type of roles. But then just the observation that with all the complexities going on strategically, how do we be sort of fit for that? And then, as I said, that period of my life where I was doing business transformation consulting, actually sort of seeing that many teams were not fit to be able to execute their own strategy. So that sort of that match fitness observation has been was in my 2020 book. But then since then, I've also been going even way deeper onto actually how do you build the match fitness across the organization so that the board have got the match fitness, the exec team have the match fitness, and then also that you've engaged the energy, the right energy in your organization to be able to follow it through. So my obsession is actually about how to help leaders deliver on their vision and actually sort of see that happen.
And so we've just finished talking about transformation, and your book is Disruption. How do you differentiate between disruption and transformation?
Yeah, I differentiate it as actually the disruption. There's a lot more intention with transformation, that you're actually bringing your intention to the change, where disruption happens to me, right? So actually I get disrupted. And I think that actually in this era, and that all the research that, I've done a lot of research with organizations and also other people's research, secondary research in preparation for this book, the level of disruption, external factors is actually on the rise, as we know, right? So actually all leaders are dealing with not only their intended changes, but also lots of external factor disruptions. That's an ongoing thing. So actually being able to be centered in yourself and being able to be clear in how you're feeling and thinking are actually sort of key things to leading disruption with grace.
Fascinating. I have time for one more question, and this question, Bernie, is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey from the corporate world to starting off on your own as a transformation guru, writing your own book, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey and from our conversation?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power for your listeners in thinking through the different time perspectives. There's things that are really important to me if I look at it from just the next week, but actually sort of looking at it through multiple perspectives. So I really would encourage people to actually think about things from the 10-year perspective. I dropped down into 1,000 days. That's sort of just over the 3-year classic strategic window, which a lot of us use for organizations, but we can use for ourselves as well.
Yeah.
And then the quarterly or the 100-day planning cycle, which is really good for implementing new things. And using that sort of those different time perspectives gives us a more rounded view of what really matters to us. So I think that's actually a really powerful takeaway.
Fascinating. And on that note, and what an amazingly powerful thought you've given us, which is think through time perspectives. Where will I be, or where will my business be, or where will a relationship be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And then you drilled it down further to say, where would you be 1,000 days from now, 1 month from now, and we could actually build perspectives in very, very short, bite-sized time zones as well. But I think what's a very important, the message you've given to everyone is how important it is to build perspectives.
Yes.
Thank you, Bernie, for talking to me about your amazing journey, about transformation. I learned many, many new things from you today about transformation. Thank you also for talking to me about your book, Leading Disruption with Grace, which you said will be out in July, August. And I look forward to reading the book once it's out. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to speak.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.